After my grandmother's passing, the old house became mine. When the lawyer handed me the key, I caught a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, a moment of doubt, as if he were debating whether to warn me about something. But in the end, he only offered a brief, "Good luck." Then he left, quickly. The house sat at the edge of town, long neglected, its stone walls cracked and veined with moss. The wooden door, once painted a rich mahogany, was now peeling, revealing the dark, raw grain beneath. As I slid the key into the lock, it scraped against the metal, a dry, grating sound that sent an uneasy shiver down my spine. The door swung open slowly, revealing a dim corridor. Dust floated in the air, catching the weak sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows. The smell of old wood, damp fabric, and something deeper, a faint trace of rot, lingered in the stillness. Long shadows stretched across the worn wooden floor, distorting the outlines of the furniture, making them seem blurred. I stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath my weight, the sound echoing through the empty space. Old photographs still hung on the walls, my grandmother's face, frozen in time, watching me. The expressions in the images were familiar, comforting, but something about them felt off. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe it was the house itself. I forced the thought away, dropped my bag, and began to reacquaint myself with this strange, yet strangely familiar place. By nightfall, the cold had crept in. A chill that seeped through the walls and settled deep in my bones. That was when I noticed it. The silence. The house wasn't just quiet. It was too quiet. An unnatural silence, a stillness that felt deliberate. Old houses should make noise, the groan of settling beams, the murmur of wind through window panes. But this was the kind of silence that listens, that waits. At 3 a.m., I woke up. Something had changed. The air felt thick, too heavy, too still. I could hear my own heartbeat, the faint rush of blood through my veins. And then, a sound. Soft, faint, distant. A lock unlatching. Every muscle in my body went rigid. The sound had come from outside my bedroom door. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the dim hallway. And saw it. The basement door was open. A black, gaping void. Like a silent, open mouth. I told myself it was the wind. But the windows were shut. There was no wind. Then, footsteps. From the basement. Slow. Light. Bare feet against the cold stone steps. Deliberate. Measured. Each step landed with a rhythm that crawled under my skin. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing. No movement. No sound. No explanation. I stared at the blackened threshold, heart hammering against my ribs, feeling the creeping, suffocating dread settle over me. How long did I stand there? I don't know. By the time the sky began to pale with dawn, the air inside the house felt lighter. The oppressive chill had faded. And yet, the basement door remained open, as if it had never been touched. Daylight washed away the unease of the night. I convinced myself that it was all in my head. Old houses creak. Wood contracts. Perhaps a rat scurried inside the walls. Logical explanations. Anything to bury the fear lingering in my bones. But when night fell again, I heard it. The basement door. Opening. Again. My hands clenched into fists, a flicker of frustration rising in my chest. Whatever was behind this, I had to find out. I stepped forward, stopping just before the doorway, peering down the stairs. The steps vanished into absolute blackness. Dust clung to the wooden stairs, undisturbed, untouched, as if no one had walked there in years. Yet, that feeling was back. the feeling of being watched. Something in the darkness, staring at me. Not this time. I wouldn't let it happen again. I grabbed a sturdy chain, wrapped it tightly around the door, and secured it with a heavy padlock. No matter what was trying to open that door, it wouldn't get through. I stood there for a moment, gripping the lock, reassuring myself that it was secure. Then I let out a slow breath, turned away, and returned to my room. That night, I slept lightly. And at exactly 3 a.m., I woke up. The silence was unnatural. No wind. No night insects. Not even the faint groan of the house settling. It was as if the entire world had been muted. I turned in bed, moving carefully, as if any sound would be heard. Then, the chain. Sliding. Falling. A wave of ice flooded my veins. I froze, staring at the ceiling, barely breathing. Then, I heard it. The slow, deliberate sound of the door creaking open. The darkness gaped at me from the hallway. A beat of silence. Then, footsteps. Soft. Deliberate. Coming from the basement. Not the usual groan of wood shifting. These were actual footsteps. Something was coming up. I could hear the careful weight of bare feet pressing into the stairs. Steady. Unhurried. Approaching. I couldn't move. My heart slammed against my ribs, the blood in my veins turning to ice. Then, the footsteps stopped. Right outside my bedroom door. For a moment, there was nothing. No movement. No sound. Then, the doorknob turned. Slowly. Silently. It wasn't locked. My body finally broke free from its paralysis. I lunged forward, hands slamming against the door, gripping the handle so tightly my knuckles turned white. Something was there. I could feel it on the other side. Waiting. Watching. Neither of us moved. The room remained silent, yet the presence lingered, pressing against the threshold, pushing, waiting for me to let go. I gritted my teeth, every muscle locked, refusing to budge an inch. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? Until the first light of dawn bled through the curtains. Only then did the tension fade. Only then did the thing behind the door retreat. I waited until I was sure the weight was gone. Then, I opened the door. The hallway was empty. But the basement door, wide open. The chain and lock, neatly placed beside it. And in the thin layer of dust on the wooden floor, a trail of small footprints, leading from the basement to my door. I stood at the threshold of the basement, gripping my flashlight tightly. The beam cut through the thick, clinging darkness, illuminating the steep wooden staircase spiraling down into the abyss. A wave of cold air drifted up, thick with dust and mildew, the scent of something long forgotten, something buried beneath time. I swallowed hard. Then, I took the first step. The staircase groaned beneath my weight, an uneasy protest that sent a shiver down my spine. My heartbeat pounded like a war drum. Each step felt heavier. The walls seemed to breathe around me, carrying back my own shallow breaths, or was there another breath, just beyond the reach of my light, matching mine? When I finally reached the basement floor, my flashlight flickered across the crumbling walls. And that was when I saw the markings. At first, they looked like scratches, random lines carved into the wood. Like a child's absent-minded doodling etched into the wall with a dull blade. But as I stepped closer, the light defined them. Height marks. I froze. From the lowest mark, barely reaching my waist, to one at my exact height, each line was carefully labeled with a date, the handwriting growing steadier and more mature as it ascended. I took a step back, my breath catching. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe another boy had lived here. Someone who just happened to share my height, my growth pattern. But I knew better. The writing, the slant of the letters, the pressure of each carved stroke. It was familiar. Too familiar. It looked like my handwriting. But I had never grown up in this house. This wasn't possible. A slow, creeping chill curled up my spine. I forced my shaking hand to turn the flashlight away from the markings, sweeping the beam across the rest of the basement. My light landed on a small, rusted bed frame pushed against the far wall. The mattress was stained, the fabric frayed with age. And lying in the corner, covered in dust, was a stuffed bear. Its black, glassy eyes stared up at me. Unblinking. Unmoved. Waiting. Then, I saw it. A photo album, yellowed and brittle with age, sitting beside the bed. I hesitated, my fingers hovering above it. Then, slowly, I opened the first page. A boy, no older than 5 or 6, stood in a garden, smiling brightly at the camera. His dark eyes were wide with joy, his small hands clutching the hem of his shirt. He looked exactly like me. No. Not just similar. Identical. A cold sweat broke across my skin. I flipped the pages faster now, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Every single photo was of him. Playing. Laughing. Sitting at the very same rusted bed behind me. But always here. Always in this basement. Not once did the pictures show him outside the house. My stomach twisted. The flashlight trembled in my grasp as I turned to the final page. A black and white photo stared back at me. A woman stood at the entrance of the basement, holding the child in her arms. Her face was blurred, as if the image itself rejected her presence. And behind her, on the wall, a name was scrawled in faded ink. Jonas. The photo album slipped from my fingers. The pages scattered across the floor, their edges curling in the damp air. And in that instant, something deep, something long buried, began to claw its way back into my mind. Memories, fractured and blurred, suppressed and forgotten. They were coming back. Memories surged like a broken dam, drowning me. Jonas. My twin brother. He existed. He was real. But I had forgotten him. The images came in fragments, flickering like an old film reel, 2 boys running through a sunlit garden, wearing matching clothes, laughter intertwining in the warm air. Our mother holding our hands. Our grandmother watching from the window, her gaze unreadable. Then, a shift. The scene warped, twisting at its edges. Mother's face blurred. Grandmother's eyes turned cold. And Jonas, he began to fade. I couldn't remember how he died. I couldn't remember when he disappeared from my life. I couldn't even remember the last time I saw him. But I knew now, he never truly left. The air in the basement turned frigid. Somewhere behind me, I heard it, a faint breath, slow and deliberate. Something awakening. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My heart slammed against my ribs, pulse thundering in my ears. My grip tightened around the flashlight, my fingers numb with cold. The air thickened. Every breath felt like swallowing something dense, something unseen. Then, a voice. Not a whisper in my ear. A whisper in my mind. You finally remember. A wave of terror crashed over me. I bolted, feet skidding against the damp floor, nearly slipping as I lunged for the stairs. The door was so close. I reached out, fingers grasping the handle. Slam. The door shut on its own, trapping me in the darkness. The whispering grew louder. Not just one voice, many. Laughter. Crying. A chorus of murmurs, weaving together in an eerie melody. And behind me, something moved. I could feel him now. Jonas. His presence pressed against the edges of my senses, not quite here, not quite gone. Like a missing limb that still ached. The door handle twisted beneath my grip. It gave way. With one final, desperate push, I stumbled onto the floor, gasping, my vision spinning. The basement door remained open behind me. I didn't dare look inside. I didn't want to see. Then, slowly, the door closed on its own. And this time, it stayed closed. The silence pressed against my ears. My breath came in ragged gulps. I forced myself to stand, taking a shaky step backward, away from the door. Jonas. His name echoed in my skull. It was over. Or maybe it wasn't. Because as I turned toward the hallway mirror, my reflection stared back at me, pale, shaken, exhausted. And beside me, a second shadow, leaning in close, mouth parted in a silent whisper. "You won't forget me again, will you?"